Hello everyone, it's Dr. Nadine Hamilton with you for session 11, which is going to look at workplace health and safety issues. In this session, we'll provide a brief introduction to occupational health and safety legislative requirements, prevention and management of occupational health and safety incidents, development of occupational health and safety strategies, and occupational health and safety policies and procedures. So first of all, we'll take a quick look at the legislative requirements. So occupational health and safety, which is often referred to as OHS or OHS, and more recently referred to as workplace health and safety or WHS or WH&S, takes a look at basically our workplaces and making sure that we're creating a safe work environment. So that means a safe environment for our staff, for our clients, for ourselves to work in within that business environment where they are. Yes, it can cost money to implement safety equipment, but if that's not done, and obviously where it is necessary and appropriate, if it's not done, then it can turn out to be more severe or more costly in the long run if there's common law claims or negligence claims or other kind of claims that might be made against you through workers' compensation, for example. So again, really important factor to be taken into consideration here. As a business owner, you have responsibilities regarding the health and safety in your workplace, so you need to make sure that you understand the workplace health and safety laws, and also that your business does not create health and safety problems or issues for your staff, for your customers, for the general public. If you have stands or mats outside your front door that people may trip on, for example. So, and also making sure, obviously, that it's a safe environment for yourself as well as everybody that's directly involved within your business, or as we said, the general public if they're going to be at risk as well from some health and safety issue. You are obliged under the legislation to provide things such as a safe premises, safe machinery or safe equipment and materials, safe systems of work, training, instruction and information and supervision around how, if you're using machinery or equipment or materials, how to actually use those in a safe manner. You're also required to provide a suitable working environment and facilities, as well as insurance, depending on public liability insurance and workers' compensation insurance for your employees. And that generally also extends to contractors as well, but it is advisable to check with the workers' compensation governing body within your state or territory to find out what their requirements are. Complying with these duties, again, it protects you and it protects your staff, and also helps to prevent you from being fined or legal action being taken against you. There are authorities, workplace health and safety authorities in each of the state and territory, as well as Safe Work Australia, which have responsibilities for ensuring that workplace health and safety legislation is enforced. They can also provide education, they can provide advice, they can provide training on health and safety at work as well. Workers also have obligations to themselves and their workmates and as well clients, so it's not just up to the manager or the owner of the business. Employees, everyone around also has that duty of care to make sure, if you see that there's a puddle of water in the middle of the floor that somebody could slip on, which is a safety hazard and potential risk, then you do have an obligation to make sure that that's reported and, maybe blocked off or cleaned up if you can, to make sure that you minimise that risk or hopefully eliminate that risk as much as is practical as well. As a worker, you must also comply with the instructions that are given to you regarding workplace health and safety, using personal protective equipment, commonly known as PPE, if your employer has provided that, and making sure that you're properly trained to use that and that they require you to use that equipment. Not deliberately doing something that could provide or could cause potential injury or hazards within the workplace, anything that could breach the workplace health and safety. Not willfully placing yourselves or others at risk, or not willfully injuring yourself either. Workplace health and safety requirements, again, depending on which state or territory you are in, there are different governing bodies within each of those states and territories, and they do have different requirements. They do have different restrictions for their workers as far as if a worker has a workers' compensation claim, what those processes are. There's a list here of the relevant authority within each of the states and territory in Australia, and again I would really encourage you to have a look at the workplace health and safety governing body within your state or territory to make sure that you're familiar with those requirements as well. Before 2012, health and safety laws were known as OHS laws or OHS laws. Again, that's where you do see the WHS, OHS similarities there. It's just due to the dates and when the new laws and restrictions came into place. So they tried to make the governments, the states and territories, found that there was some confusion across the states and territories for people to try and make sense out of. So they set out to make them more consistent across the board, which is where the new model came in, which is the WHS Act and regulations. So that came out in 2012. So each of the states and territories have made new laws based on those overall laws, the model laws, excluding Victoria and Western Australia. So that also explains, if you are in Victoria or Western Australia, that you may still hear health and safety referred to as occupational health and safety or OH&S rather than WHS or workplace health and safety. Taking a look now at prevention and management of occupational health and safety incidents or workplace health and safety incidents, depending on your state or territory. So each business, regardless of how large it is, how many staff you have, must have some risk assessments in place that meet legal obligations. And they can include things such as making sure that you have a fire extinguisher and that it is housed appropriately, all those sorts of things to make sure that that workplace and that environment is as healthy and as safe as possible. Your risk management plan should identify any risks in your business. So if you're using products or your service might involve something that could potentially injure somebody, then you need to make sure that that's covered and identified in your risk management plan. So that plan should also describe ways of minimising the likelihood that an incident may occur, and also by including different measures or different controls to try and either prevent the hazard, which is obviously preferable, or manage the hazards. So that might be, for example, if you're working as an acupuncturist, and having needles around, making sure that there is access there to safely dispose of those needles and using them in a safe manner, making sure that your footwear is covered in, your personal protective equipment is as safe as it possibly can be to protect yourself and to your clients and other staff that are in that practice as well. You obviously need to monitor the risks and review and update your plan on a regular basis. So this will again help your business resilience and help you recover from incidents. So the more proactive you can be and preventative you can be, the better. So you want to ideally minimise or eliminate those risks as much as possible, because if an incident happens, it can be very costly to yourself or to your business or both. So when we're looking at risk management, we start to look at a hazard. So a hazard is something that has the capacity to cause harm. So that could be injury or physical harm, such as falling and hurting your back, or slipping on something and breaking your elbow, or an actual physical harm, or physical injury. It could be cutting yourself on machinery, or inhaling toxic fumes, for example. A risk is the likelihood that the harm will occur from exposure to that hazard. So the risk is that if this does occur, so if this hazard is present, what is the risk that will come from that? So what risk could our staff or our clients or the general public be exposed to if this hazard is present? Workplace hazards involve the risk of illnesses or injury. So some of those hazards that could cause illness or injury can include any chemicals and hazardous substances. So that could be dangerous goods, asbestos, lead and waste management. I'm sorry, the little computer just did a little crazy thing then. Sorry that just flashed up on your screen. So again, it could be anything that comes under that category. So it might be that you work in a toxic environment with, again, chemical waste or hazardous substances there. Could be biological hazards and infectious diseases. So it may be that you're working as part of a medical centre or a hospital environment or a clinic where people come in and do have different illnesses that could be bloodborne or airborne as well, that could potentially have a hazard to other people. Physical hazards, so it could be working in confined spaces or working at a height, having electrical hazards or equipment as well could also comprise part of those hazards, as well as manual task hazards, so such as the use of the human body. So that might be physical labour if you're heavy lifting all the time or working in a confined space that requires your body to be manoeuvred in such a position to be able to carry out that task. Some other hazards that involve the risk of illness or injury, again, environmental hazards. So this could be things like noise. If you're exposed to prolonged noise, maybe there's jackhammering going on right outside your window and, you know, it's above the healthy level for hearing, you know, at the decibel level. Maybe insufficient lighting or the surrounding environment might not be appropriate. There could be really cold environment, like the heating might not work or the air conditioning might not work. There could be dust or there could be other things that might come out that could be creating an environmental hazard. Also that comes into it is the psychosocial hazards. So work-related stress, work overload, workplace harassment, which we talked about in the previous session, occupational violence, fatigue, these factors also come into it, you know, and some occupations are at more risk or are at a higher risk than others for the psychosocial hazards as well. So when we're looking at prevention and management, we want to look at effective risk management. So this starts with that commitment to health and safety, being involved and trying to get the cooperation of your staff in this to show that you take health and safety seriously, and you also want them to take it seriously as well, because nobody wants to be injured at the workplace. You know, nobody wants to have to go through this as well. It can be a costly process to go through, as well as obviously the physical aspects that somebody can suffer and how prolonged that can be with return to work and, you know, injury management and all those other factors that come into it. So some of the things that you can do to demonstrate that commitment: getting involved in health and safety issues, investing time and money in health and safety, and ensuring that the responsibilities for health and safety within your workplace are clearly understood, and having the opportunity for your staff to ask questions if they don't understand. You know, so you might see that an extension cord is placed across the middle of, you know, a thoroughfare. If that's not taped down or in a, you know, securely placed, then that can be a hazard, you know, which could then propose a serious risk if somebody trips over it. So just little things like that, again, little spillages that you might see, you know, if they're easy enough to clean up, you know, go and wipe that up. Or if it needs, you know, a mop and bucket, or, you know, needs a little bit more attention, you know, covering the area, protecting the area so that nobody can slip in that area, you know, and trying to do what you can to prevent an incident from happening. The risk management process. So first of all, identifying hazards, finding out the things that could cause harm. Assess those risks. So if those hazards could cause harm, then you want to assess, you know, what is the likelihood that this would happen? If it does happen, how serious could this be? What are the consequences of this hazard if they occur? You also want to control the risks. So if that hazard can't be avoided, how can we control to try and minimise the risk as much as possible? And again, reviewing those measures to make sure that they're working as they are planned to do. So identifying hazards in the workplace. So this is finding things and or situations that could potentially cause harm. So they generally arise from different aspects of work and their interaction. So it may be the physical work environment. Is your work setting ergonomic? Or is your chair unsatisfactory? Or how you've got your computer set out, is that causing some physical injuries, some neck strain or some back strain? Or are you working in an environment where the equipment or the substances or materials that might be used are generally going to pose a hazard? So do you need to take into account that the personal protective equipment? Or is it at risk? Do you need two people to operate a piece of equipment rather than one person? Have you got your safety shields and everything on machinery that needs it? Also looking at work tasks and how those tasks are performed. Are you looking at the correct postural way to perform that task? Could it be done in an easier way? Is it too much for one person, too much strain, or is it like heavy lifting for one person? And also looking at the work design and the management of that. The work overload can also come into that as well if, there's too much work. So looking at that and how that could be effectively taken into account and maybe managed a little bit better to try and minimise any risk.